And let's get some common sense from my next guest, Mark Littlewood. He's the Director of Popular Conservatism and joins us now. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, Julia. Good to be with you.
Look, I mean, where to even start with this epic climb down from Keir Starmer? Some of the headlines are saying, Keir Starmer, managed to get through his welfare reform, stave off rebellion. No, he didn't. He completely capitulated on key elements of his welfare reform. There is no welfare reform in the welfare reform bill. That's actually not called a welfare reform bill. Good thing, because it doesn't actually reform things. It was supposed to save best part of £5 billion for taxpayers. It'll actually end up costing taxpayers more. We've got another £5 billion black hole for Rachel Reeves to fill. What did you make of the whole farce last night?
Yeah, I think it's even worse than you've just suggested, Julia. I mean,
how?
Well, it's worth remembering, even if, let's imagine a parallel universe where Keir Starmer's bill had gone through unamended, no concessions. It doesn't actually cut the welfare bill. It just stops it going up as rapidly.
Yeah.
So even if it had passed in its entirety, I think you're only dealing with the very tip of the iceberg that you need to tackle in order to get public spending under control. Yeah. But as you rightly say, it has basically died a complete death.
Yeah.
So there are, I think, a couple of lessons here. One is that we've got to have a much more serious debate about the state of our public finances. It now seems it's almost impossible to make any savings reduction anywhere, and that means that the country is on a trajectory of going bust at some point. You referenced Greece a little earlier in the show. The second is a political point that Keir Starmer has now completely lost control of the Labour troops in the House of Commons. And once you start making U-turns, it started with a sort of winter fuel allowance, but once you start making them, there is blood in the water. And any statement you come out with about anything you intend to do, everybody will immediately think, well, is he going to stick to this one? Or is there going to be yet another U-turn?
So that's a disaster politically, just talking about his political and moral authority, which he appears to have absolutely none. Now, I don't think he had any in the first place, but certainly none left now. Is there anything different that he could have done? Could he have said, no, this is a sodding vote of confidence, as some cabinet ministers suggested in private phone calls to Labour MPs, I will, the government will fall, and I will call a general election if you don't vote for this, because this was in our manifesto. We said we'd do it. We need to do it. Do you think he could or should have done that?
It potentially. What seems to have gone wrong here, though, from what I can gather of the Labour operation, was a failure of political intelligence. They didn't really have their finger on the pulse about how many rebels are there.
Hold on a minute. I mean, you're not going to be surprised in number 10 that a bunch of Labour MPs are going to be unhappy, who's low in the polls, low popularity for the Prime Minister, and who've faced all these problems over the winter fuel payments after the local elections and the Runcorn by-election. You don't have to be like a political genius. You don't have to be John Curtis, for goodness sake, to think, oh, maybe these Labour MPs might not like cutting welfare for disabled people.
Sure, Julia. You'd be aware of that. But as ex-President Lyndon Johnson was fond of saying, the first rule of politics is learning how to count. Yeah. It matters exactly how many of them are willing to fire a three-line whip.
Because it is just the usual
some
suspects.
Of them back on board. Yeah.
That's okay.
Is it really? Are there 60 of these rebels? Are there 70? Are there 80? Are there 100?
Yeah.
Are there 150 of these rebels? All of those sort of calculations, which need to be on a absolutely worked out to the last jot and comma, they failed to do. So they, I think, were surprised by the sheer numbers against them and the determination of the rebels.
Yeah, well, indeed.
And a well-run government should not be surprised by either. They should be able to identify
if they're paying attention. And even though, with a massive watering down of this bill, to the extent that it's actually the part of the name of, that's I find extraordinary part of the name of the bill. It's a Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill. That's the official name. It doesn't do anything about personal independence payments other than this review set up by Stephen Timms, which you don't need legislation. And even though they had a climb down on virtually everything, but they're going to be spending more money on helping get people back into work. I mean, I'm encouraged by that, but I think you need the stick as well as the carrot. 49 Labour MPs voted against, 19 also abstained. That is a big rebellion by any stretch of the imagination. You mentioned earlier about the state of the public finances, and if you've got a party in power who simply do not accept but the majority of those MPs, that there need to be massive cuts to huge swathes of the public spending commitments, and that has to include welfare, because you simply can't cut everything else on the same basis. You said we could go bust, and a caller earlier, John, was talking about we're going to end up going cap in hand to the IMF. Is that actually likely to happen?
If we continue on this trajectory, yes.
But isn't every other Western government doing the same? And America just voted for this big, beautiful bill, which massive increase in debt there.
Yeah, I mean, we're not unique in the Western world. I think America has more of a growth strategy. We were told our government here was going to be laser focused on growth. Well,
Yes.
I haven't seen a great deal of that laser focusing on anything. So one way you can get out of trouble is even if on the face of it you're spending more and more, as long as you're growing pretty consistently, clipping along at 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5% per annum growth, suddenly you can pay those bills more easily. Well, our growth is particularly stagnant. And the inflection point would be this, really. I mean, if politicians don't get serious about making these decisions, the markets will. Yeah. And you referenced earlier the cost of borrowing money for the UK government is extraordinarily high. We are spending more on simply servicing our debt than we are spending on education. And if you keep going in this direction, the markets will demand a higher and higher rate of return for lending you a buck.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're seeing now. For all of the talk that Liz Truss crashed the economy, the amount that markets are demanding now is considerably higher than it was even when she was Prime Minister. That keeps going up. And at some point, reality bites, and you have to make some serious reductions.
I mean, we are looking, the budget is going to have some big tax rises and or some big spending cuts. And a lot of people are under the view, where are we going to get those spending cuts from? Can I get you onto something else there? Because I guess it's another big expenditure, actually, is dealing with illegal migration, channel boat migrants. We've got some figures that suggest now, official figures, given 900 on Monday alone. 20,000 small boat migrants have arrived this year, January to June, the first 6 months of the year. It looks set for a record for this whole year, despite the Prime Minister saying he was going to smash the gangs, and a nice chat with Macron and Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels, and it was all going to be solved. And the big problem was that Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak didn't have a good relationship with the EU and France, and if only you put Labour in, they can deal with it. How's that going?
Yeah, it's going terribly. I mean, how many gangs have been smashed? None at all.
I'm sure there's been one arrest or two.
Well, a couple of arrests. I'm not sure. I mean, of individual people, I'm not sure that any single whole gang has been taken out by the ferocity of Keir Starmer's anti-immigration policies. It truly is a shambles. And you've got to get several things right, of which I think this government and indeed the last government basically got none of them right. You need to have very firm enforcement. So Border Force needs to know what it's doing and be properly resourced in order to tackle this. And that includes working more closely with the French. I would make sure the French were paid by results, by the way, not a grant, but a particular bounty for each boat they've stopped or individual they
but hold on a minute. Every boat they stop, that's all very well. But they can seize some dinghies and put holes in them. They can do whatever they want. Yeah. But every time you stop a boat, then those people just go back onto the beaches, hide in the sand dunes, and then they come out again in 2 days' time to get on another boat.
Well, you can decide what results you want, Julia, and pay the French by achieving those, not necessarily by holding any boat, perhaps by arrests of these gangs, right? You decide what results you want the French to produce and pay them per result. Don't pay them in a block grant, which means they don't even have any incentive to stop anything, pretty much, other than goodwill. But the other thing we've got to get right is the legal system this end. I mean, it is ludicrous how long it takes to process these claims. It is ludicrous the ease with which you can stay in the United Kingdom and the generosity with which you're with which you are treated whilst you are awaiting that outcome. I want to see asylum applications sped up from something like 18 months on average to something nearer 18 hours. I'd accept 18 days, I think, but no more than 18
That would
days.
work. What do you make of Donald Trump visit in Florida to be built within a very, very, very short period of time? This alligator Alcatraz, as he's dubbed it. This is a detention camp next to an airport, basically. If you're a legal migrant, you're rounded up by ICE, you're taken into custody, and you're put in this, effectively like a prison camp, in bunk beds. If people are watching, bunk beds within cages, and surrounded by alligators and God knows what in the neighbouring land and water, and then you are planed back to your home. Do we need to do a bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the alligator stuff is a bit too flamboyant for my taste, Julia. I mean,
I'm not saying we should import
Bond
them.
villain, isn't it? That's a sort of Bond villain type thing. But basically, again, yes. I mean, I think we need to build facilities that needn't be inhumane, but should be rudimentary to house these people, rather than putting them up in hotels at the cost of 200 quid or more per night. Absolutely ludicrous. It should be the barest rudimentary stuff. One bed, 3 square meals a day, but no frivolities. We need those sort of facilities. The fact that we don't get them means that asylum seeking has basically taken over a good chunk of our hotel sector. That's completely unacceptable and inappropriate. So I'd go with Trump nearly all the way, probably stop just short of the alligators.
Thank you very much, Mark Little, Director of Public Conservatism. Claire Pearsall still here in the studio. What do you want to say?
I think Mark's right when you look at if we go back to Starmer and his set of problems, is he doesn't actually know the people he's dealing with. Yeah. And I overheard a couple of Labour MPs, I was walking behind them, having a discussion about how they had...
Stalking.
You say stalking. I say walking behind. They had never met Keir Starmer in the year that they've been in Parliament.
Oh, yeah.
And you just sort of think... I know there's a lot of you, but you can't continue.
Should have done a load of glad handing. That's what you do. Again, high and mighty, arrogant. It's just an empty suit, as I said earlier.